vulnerable to economic events like this recession caused by the current health crisis. While many Americans have been impacted by the economic fallout related to COVID-19, according to Ahu Yildirimaz, co-head of ADP Research Institute, in late April of this year, the declines in employment were 3 to 4% larger for women, which is rare for recessions. That gap grew to 5 percentage points by mid-May. Although women had made significant advancements over the past few decades in the workplace, this group still faces many challenges compared to their male counterparts with respect to a financially secure future. Apart from pay disparity, women often carry the responsibility for family planning and caregiving, requiring time out of the workplace. COVID-19 has deepened these challenges and placed women perilously on the brink of losing further economic ground. Now, more than ever, the economic security of women hangs in the balance. Awareness is a first step, and programs like this one, from Funding Our Future, can provide a podium to highlight the issues and positively influence change. At ADP, we are dedicated to helping employees achieve financial wellness through comprehensive workplace solutions. We understand that financial wellness doesn't just happen. It takes engagement and encouragement, so employees gain confidence and financial literacy while building financial security. One way we nurture financial wellness is through our personalized education program that connects participants in our retirement plan solutions to tools and resources to help them gain the essential financial skills they will use throughout their lives. ADP also brings together financial wellness applications that help workers improve financial literacy, manage debt, save for college, and more through the ADP Marketplace, where employers have access to a variety of solutions that can help address the specific financial wellness needs of their workforce. It's not only about employers offering financial wellness, but also advancing gender equality through diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion are important values at every level within ADP. We are committed to investing in diverse talent globally and creating a space where all associates can grow and make positive contributions. Our development programs help prepare and promote women into leadership roles because we understand that actions speak louder than words. During the program, we encourage you to ask any questions you may have about personal finance and particularly the pandemic's impact. To ask a question, use the live chat function on YouTube and Facebook or tweet your question with the hashtag BPCLive. We'll be taking a few audience questions for the panelists later on in the event. Now, let me turn this over to Alexis Christoforous, our moderator this afternoon and an anchor and reporter for Yahoo Finance. Alexis has an impressive and award-winning background in network television and radio journalism, and her career has spanned on-air roles at CBS News and Bloomberg. Alexis, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Beth, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. I know we're in for a very lively discussion on a very important topic, and we want you to be able to leave today's discussion with actionable things you can do to make an impact on your finances, your relationship with money, and investing. So let's get right to it. I want to welcome our panel this afternoon. I want to welcome Carrie Schwab Pomerantz. She is the board chair and the president of the Charles Schwab Foundation. We also have Michelle Singletary, is a personal finance columnist for the Washington Post. Also with us today, Emily Green. She's the director of private wealth management at Ellevest, and that's a financial company founded to help women. And we also have Maggie Germano. She's the CEO and a financial coach for Maggie Germano Financial Coaching. So my thanks to all of you ladies for joining us today. And you know, we come together just a couple of days after the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a legal pioneer for gender equality. And I wanted to share one of my favorite quotes of hers that I thought was fitting for today. She said, "My mother told me to be a lady. And for her, that meant be your own person, be independent." And I thought that's pretty apropos for today's discussion because we're talking about helping women be independent when it comes to their money and their finances. And might I add, men very welcome into this conversation, and we hope we have lots of you joining us for this as well. I want to, again, thank our panel and start by asking the same question of each of you, if I could. Carrie, I'm going to start with you. And here's the question.
Okay.
What is a woman's greatest strength when it comes to money and investing?
So I'm going to say two things. I'm going to say patience, which is a key to investing because it's a long-term endeavor. And then the other is they don't let ego get in the way of progress. We're willing to ask questions and know what we don't know.
All right, patience and no ego. Michelle, what is a woman's greatest strength when it comes to investing and her money?
I think awareness. The more you know about your investing, what you're making, the better investor you'll be and the better you'll be able to handle your money. Oftentimes, women have been told, oh, we're not good at math, or we sort of shy away from things financial because we've been told that we're not good at it. First of all, we're good at it. Just because our faces aren't on the money doesn't mean that we don't know how to handle the money. So I think just the more you know, and even if you don't know, being aware of what you don't know can help you be a better financial manager and investor.
For sure. All right, Emily, what's a woman's greatest strength when it comes to money?
So women are actually better investors than men. I know it's crazy because when you think of the word investor, you picture an old white man. But women are actually, they're more rational and they tend to be goals based, which means they think long term and do not react to market movements like we've seen a lot this year. So actually over the long term, women tend to do better.
Interesting. So we're not working off our emotions as some might think we might be. All right, Maggie, what about you?
So I think it's really great how women actually prioritize their values and the things they care about most when it comes to their money, whether it is reinvesting back into their families or being thoughtful about where they're spending their money or investing their money and the way that it impacts the world kind of at large. That's something that I think is a huge benefit for women.
Love it. And I also love how each of you sort of has your own niche within this topic and this conversation, bringing something different to the table. We have a relationship with money, and we start that relationship at a pretty young age. And for better or for worse, it usually happens at home. And Carrie, I know that you spent a lot of time talking about this, researching this, and you say we actually tend to talk to boys differently about money than we do with girls. How so, and how can we start to change that narrative?
Yeah, I think parents don't really realize it, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been studying attitudes and behaviors among gender for years and years, and it all starts in the family. And parents are talking to their sons about investing, estate planning, debt. With our daughters, it's savings and budgeting, which are really important concepts. But if it's gonna come down to building wealth, we need to understand how to invest as well. And through our studies, most recent one of 16 to 25-year-olds, young men were twice as many young men as women had investment accounts. So we want to talk about the structural issues in our country, which are absolutely there, but it does start at home. And we can just so easily just change that conversation.
Maggie, how might we start to change that conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think starting off by assuming that anyone might have to manage their own money at any given time in their life, whether they're a woman or a man, whether that means that they might not partner off eventually, or they might end up single or remain single throughout their lives, or they just want to be the person that's kind of in charge of their finances, no matter what is going on. So making that assumption, whether you have daughters or sons, and teaching them with that assumption.
Michelle, women have been told that more education will lead to better wages. Women are now half of the U.S. college-educated workforce, yet we're still earning less than men. I read somewhere on average, a man with a bachelor's degree earns about $26,000 more than a woman with a similar degree or the same degree. The gap we know is even wider for women of color. How do we start to narrow that gap?
Well, I mean, obviously policy. We have to make sure that the policies are in place so that there's not wage discrimination. I think we have to empower ourselves and women to ask for more. The salary negotiations are just sort of really hard um, for women. And it was for me personally. I was sort of afraid to ask. I didn't want to, it sounds ridiculous that I was going to somehow insult my boss by asking for more. And I have to tell you, my mentor on this issue happened to be a Black male. And I went and I said, I want a raise. And I was like, I'm not so sure. And he was just like, look, some white boys ask for whatever they want. You should ask for what you want. And ever since then, I negotiate myself. And I think we just said to say, you should know what you're worth and ask for it. And then shop yourself around all the time. I mean, don't tell the Post because hopefully then I'll watch it. I'm always talking to other people like, who wants me? Because sometimes it's not until somebody else wants you that you can get a raise. So you should always be shopping yourself. If that in fact is the culture of where you work, is that they're not going to give you more money until they know somebody else wants you. Sort of like dating, guys like to, I shouldn't go there, but
no, it's true. You want what you don't have a little bit more, right? When somebody else is looking, well, that makes you more interested.
Right. But it has to be both, Rose, right? We can't just put it on women. We also have to make sure that there are policies in place in companies where there is pay equity. And then also, one of the things that they're often, and I want to get rid of this question of what did you make on your last job? Because that often starts you off behind. Because if you're already behind because you're a woman and or minority or both, then that next job is going to make you behind and you continually just stay behind. So, what I made on my last job has nothing to do with what you're going to pay me on this job. And that's what I tell people when I'm on a job.
Excellent negotiating point, right? It's, it'd be nice and a nice way to throw it back to them and say something like, well, I'd like to start the discussion after you're able to make me an offer. And, and then, sort of from where you're building, as opposed to, making their jobs easier, telling them what you made before. I see a lot of heads nodding here. Emily, I want to get to you because we talk a lot about the gender pay gap, but you say there's a gender wealth gap. And while we may not always have the power to figure out what it is we're going to be paid, we can at least look over what we're going to be investing and how we invest, right?
Yeah. So the wealth gap is actually even worse than the pay gap. We talk all about the pay gap, but the wealth gap is actually a woman's wealth on average is 32 cents on a man's dollar. And actually a Black and Latino woman, it's 1 cent on a man's dollar. So really horrendous when we think about the wealth gap. And there's lots that go into that, including the pay gap. What we focus on in Ellevest a lot is the investment gap. And so that women on average keep 70 cents of every dollar in cash over her lifetime. That costs her hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And so when I think about it, the pay gap, you can ask for money and such, but you can't actually be the one who pays yourself more. But your investment gap, you can actually decide that you are going to invest your money. It is something that you can control. You can contribute to your 401k. You can contribute to your IRA. You can invest your own money in individual accounts and such outside of that. And so it's just so important to continue to do and to start that early in life. And unfortunately, it's just not a conversation that many people have with women. And it's an industry problem, frankly, overall.
And Carrie, as we started this conversation, we see that the seeds are planted very young, right? When we talk to our young girls about money, that's when they start to have this relationship with, hey, how do I deal with finances in my own life? What do you think, Carrie, this is for you, what do you think is holding women back from taking control of their finances? And how can we encourage each other?
I really just think it's about exposure. I mean, I think about with the young women in my life, my daughter and her friends, I've made it a point of bringing them in to a Schwab office or an Ellevest office, and get exposed to a financial person, open up that application, talk about diversification and asset allocation, demystify the whole process. I do think we've been held back. It has been, unfortunately, sort of a male dominated industry, but also the process feels very dominant male. So just, once we get past that, we're right there in the game. So let's just get over that hump. And also again, talk about it at home and talk about it in the workplace and I'm a big advocate for financial literacy in the schools. Let's equalize this.
No, that's a huge part of it. It's not really finance finances are not a part of the school curriculum. What age do you think we can start to introduce that, Carrie?
Most experts would say start, 5 years old. Even with parents, by the way, with an allowance, that's a financial literacy lesson. But if you're going to kind of do the best time, I would say high school, because that's when young people are having jobs and are having to manage money. Having young people open up their Roth IRA at 16 years old with their first job. I mean, that's a great lesson, but it's a lifelong pursuit. It's, so it's starting in high school and taking it on for the rest of your life.
Maggie, what about some women who may say, you know what, this just seems so confusing to me. I don't understand investing, so it's not for me. Or they think, I just don't make enough to invest. What would your advice be to those women?
Yeah, I hear both of those comments pretty often from my clients and other folks that I talk to. So I often recommend ask for help, ask the experts, reach out to people who do know, whether that's for them to teach you or for them to help you actually manage it. So it might look like working with a financial advisor, or it might look like working with a financial coach so that you can just understand your finances more generally. But just because something doesn't make sense doesn't mean that you don't know doesn't mean that you'll never know what you're doing, because we're not born innately understanding how investing works. So educating ourselves is really important, asking for help, and talking to your friends too, because I know for me, seeing that other people are confused and stressed out about the same kinds of things actually makes me feel better, because it shows me that I'm not alone. And so the more we're talking about money with each other, the more we'll realize this isn't something that's just innate that everyone else understands and I'm the only one who doesn't. And so you'll get a little bit more comfortable with that, and then maybe be more likely to seek out that help.
Yeah, Emily, I know that you're working one-on-one with women at Valuesbased on putting their money to work and building their portfolio. What are women investing in right now? What sort of informs and guides their investment decisions?
So women tend to be very goals-based when thinking about investing. So instead of, should I pick this tech stock versus that tech stock, it's more focused on, how can I buy my house? How can I pay for my kids' college? How can I afford retirement? I've heard a lot through the pandemic of, how can I leave my job to go do something that I actually care about, which has been interesting to hear. So it's typically thinking about these types of things. And what I've realized is, the industry needs to change itself. Instead of, a lot of times how we talk to women about money is that they need to change themselves. And we need to focus on how we can help them to achieve those goals, instead of sitting in these meetings and talking about in acronyms. And, I always tell my clients, like, okay, you have a 60% equity portfolio, 40% fixed income. That means nothing to you, nothing. And so how can we make that actually in terms of, how are you going to achieve those goals that you laid out and sat through and thought about for many, many decades of your life in order to do that? And so thinking about that, and then back to Maggie's point earlier, which we can always dive more into, is the impact-based investing. And so a lot of women are wanting to invest along with their values now.
I definitely want to talk about that, because that's a huge part of it. But Michelle, I want to ask you, because women of color have been disproportionately impacted by this pandemic, and fewer numbers of them actively invest. Why do you think that is, and how can we get into these communities and get more women of color involved?
Well, we know that the hardest hit for the pandemic has been those in the service industry. And unfortunately, we are disproportionately in the service industry, restaurants, teachers, things like that. And when you are in those type of jobs, you're often not making a lot of money. If you're not making a lot of money and you're living paycheck to paycheck, there isn't much left over to invest. It's not that they don't want to invest. It's just that you're paying for the roof over your head and the food on the table. And if you're a minority, especially a Black woman, you tend to also be helping extended family members. I don't know, Carrie, you remember Schwab used to do this survey with Ariel Mutual Fund Company. And one of the things that I thought was so key to their reports that they did year after year is that African American families were, I think it was, twice as likely to be helping take care of extended family members than white families, which doesn't leave a lot to invest. And so that's where we have to attack this issue, is that help women, minority women, and women in general to have jobs, to get jobs where they have the extra money to save. And it's not that they can't or don't have the capacity, but honestly, when you're helping yourself and your extended family, there's not a lot left to put into the market to grow in your future. And you do have to do that. One of the arguments I tell people, I always ask them, what is the number one reason to invest? And people will say, oh, I want to have a nice retirement and this and that. But the number one reason is inflation. You've got to make sure that your money is going to get what you need in the future. So if not, forget all that little lofty stuff about being on the beach and so forth. You just need to be able to milk today and tomorrow. And the only way to do that is to get jobs that pay well enough for you to have that extra money.
Yeah, Carrie, I mean, a lot of the jobs, to Michelle's point, that have been impacted by this pandemic are the service industry. And so these are lower paying jobs. You do have a number of minorities holding these jobs. I guess the question becomes, has there just been a seismic shift in the workforce? Are these people going to be able to get their jobs back when we get out the other side of this pandemic?
Oh boy. I mean, that's an economic, I mean, I certainly expect so. I think, I see everybody nodding their heads. Of course, we're going to get back to it. And we've had so many disasters in our country, in our world, and we've always fought through them. And this one's taking a little longer, some divots and so forth. We won't get into that, but we will get there. We're a strong society. So we'll get there. And I will say one thing about this. It's been kind of not interesting, but the pandemic has definitely showcased the vulnerabilities of people of today. And unfortunately, I know all of you on this panel agree with me. It's now we've got to encourage not only people about investing, but really having an emergency fund. Just having a little bit of squirreled away cash for situations like this. Now, admittedly, this is taking a lot longer. But cash, in these kind of situations is king and brings you that confidence and ability to go through it.
Yeah, Michelle, you wanted to say something?
I think something that Carrie said that is so. Two things that she said. I think she's brilliant, by the way. I love Carrie. Was that I really do. She's like my role model. Is that this?
That's great.
Is
I love the other way around.
It's a love fest.
Yeah. And I love that it's all women talking about money too. Like, it's so cool. So the pandemic has, I think, exposed what is wrong with the economy, but in a way that we now realize that we are all connected. So the whole language of our country is just pull yourself out of bootstrap, as if this is a singular way for you to achieve wealth, that it's all about you and what you do. But now we know that if other folks are not making enough money, if they don't have the money to have a cushion, it impacts you directly. Look at what's happening with the markets. In March when it first happened and now, so that it is important that we all look at what's happening with the pay gap, the wealth gap, the discrimination, because if the folks behind you, below you, are not earning a decent enough living, they lose your jobs in an economy, they can't buy stuff, it impacts us all. So if you don't, selfishly, you should want to help women have pay equity with men and Blacks to have pay equity. And then the other thing she said is that this too shall pass, because the one thing that I've been women are asking me is, should I pull my money out of the market? And they want to run away because we like security. And right now the market is insane. It's up, it's down, it's sideways, and it scares people terribly. But this will pass. We have been through some incredible issues in this country, war, slavery, and we have gotten past it. So if you're an investor, you got to have a good plan and stick with it, even when it's crazy. And you know what? Yell and scream all you want. I hate when financial things say, oh, don't panic. That is just crazy. The market goes down 1,000 points. I'm going to panic, and I know what to do. So the thing is, panic but don't act on that panic and that fear. That's the difference. Don't act on it. Feel what you need to feel, because that's a legitimate feeling, but just don't act on it. And the way you don't act on it is to have a plan in place.
And Emily, you touched on this earlier, that as women investors, we don't necessarily let our emotions get away with us and trade on emotion. So talk to me a little bit about investing in this environment. It seems like there's this disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street, Wall Street continuing. I mean, I know we had a very bad day today and last week, but in general, the market has been doing very well and hitting record highs despite the pandemic and what's going on in the real economy. So where are, I guess, opportunities right now? Where has the pandemic created some opportunities for investors, and particularly for female investors?
Yeah, I think this is where that values-based investing has really become at the forefront of things. And not even just, frankly, the pandemic, with the racial justice crisis that we've gone through in our country and such. Like, I spent the month of June, we have gender lens portfolios at Ellevest, and I actually spent the month of June realizing that if we are not looking at the racial injustice within our portfolio, really our portfolio was only supporting white women. If I'm not looking at private prisons, if I'm not looking at all this, I'm not looking at any of, I'm not actually supporting all women. And so when we look at it, it's thinking about how can your money actually reflect those values that you have, and not just like how many women are in the C-suite of a company, because yes, that's important, but we don't want to only help the 1% of the 1% of women. We want to make sure that the policies at companies are right. I know that Michelle touched on, do you have daycare? Do you have parental leave? Do you have all these types of things within your companies? What kind of data privacy do companies have? Because data privacy disproportionately affects women. Climate change disproportionately affects women and people of color. So how are we looking at all of that in terms of portfolios? And it's really come to the forefront to focus on all of this today. And majority of women actually have asked their financial, I think it's 90% of people, actually, not just women, have asked their financial advisor about impact investing, and only 14% of financial advisors have actually brought anything about impact investing to their clients. And so it's becoming more and more important today. And so I think you can do it. So a lot of people think they go to their advisor and their advisor tells them they have to like give up return to do it, which is just not true. It's just, people in investing don't like to like learn new things. But really just focusing on how you can invest, but invest in ways that you really care about, which I think since Friday, frankly, has even gotten even more important the past 3 days. So just finding the right people who can help you do that right now.
Maggie, you would be one of those people to help folks who are looking to invest and have impactful investments. What are you hearing from clients, and how are you guiding them if they say, look, I want to invest in things that matter to me?
Yeah, so one of the first exercises that I have clients do with me is identifying what their values actually are. So whether that is going to determine how they're spending their money on a day-to-day basis, or where they want to be putting money when they are investing. And so getting really, really clear on what those values are, and then how those actually relate to money, how they can change their money habits to align with those values. That's a huge piece. And then again, talking to financial advisors or whoever is, helping manage your investments about what your options are when it comes to impact investing and things like that. And that's definitely coming up more and more often. Most of my clients work in either the public sphere or the nonprofit field. And so they care very passionately about a lot of things. So they want to make sure they have money to be donating or donating to campaigns, especially right now, and things like that. So looking at kind of that whole spectrum of the day-to-day spending and where you're putting your money and which companies you're kind of giving money to, and who you're helping prop up and what you're helping prop up in that way, as well as who you can be philanthropic with, as well as where your money is investing and what kinds of causes you are supporting with your investments versus the ones you might not want to be supporting.
Mm-hmm. Carrie, I know impact investing has become a bigger and bigger part of what you do at Charles Schwab. Talk to us a little bit about that, and the idea that Emily brought up, which is it's not a trade-off, right? You don't necessarily have to trade higher returns and better profits, returns on your money if you're going to go the way of impact investing?
Yeah, so we're a full financial services firm and offer ETFs and mutual funds with social impact investing. There's also, tax loss harvesting type of products where you can actually pick and choose companies that you want in or out of your portfolio. My daughter actually works at Calvert Impact Capital in Washington, D.C., Michelle, which is another wonderful social impact organization. But I would say that as an institution, you're going to see more and more options from us because so many of our clients are demanding it, like Maggie mentioned.
I want to talk about saving for retirement, which we sort of touched on in this conversation. Less than 70% of U.S. women are investing money for retirement. Less than 70%. That's compared to 81% for men. And a new poll found that, or a recent poll, I should say, found that women place investing for retirement as their fifth most important financial priority. You know where men put that? Number one. So, Maggie, I'm going to put this to you. How do we begin to change that and have women think about, saving for retirement a little higher up the ladder? Because when you look at financial priorities for women, they carry more debt than men. They often leave the workforce temporarily, at least, for childcare. Their earnings tend to peak 10 years earlier than that for men. So how do we start to change the way women are thinking about retirement?
Yeah. So first off, I would say just making it very clear how much of a priority it is, and that you don't have to have paid off your student loans first before you get and start saving for retirement. That as soon as you start working, you should be investing in your retirement, because regardless, there will be a point in your life where you will either not want to be working or you'll be unable to work. So whether that's because you get sick or injured or you're just unable to work when you're in retirement age, you might not have any other options. So you want to make sure that you have money set aside that has grown over the past 30 or 40 years that can support you and protect you. And it's not about this, like one of you said, laying on the beach and having this really romantic retirement. It's about being able to support yourself and survive as you're getting older. And women do live longer than men. And a lot of women are going to end up single again at the end of their lives because, again, a lot of women are partnered with men and they live longer than men. So they're going to be supporting themselves at some point. So thinking about yourself, it's your future self that you need to protect. It's not just about making the right financial decision, the responsible financial decision. It's about protecting yourself and your future and that of your family members so that they don't necessarily have to support you or worry about supporting you financially. And you can start very small, where it's 1% of your income is going into a retirement account. It doesn't have to be maxed out immediately. You don't have to have a match from an employer to start. Just getting started is the most important part.
And that's usually the hardest part, is just getting started. But you're right. I mean, putting something aside, even if it's 1% or less, is better than putting nothing aside. But Michelle, to your point earlier, for a lot of people hearing this, they might be saying, oh, that sounds all well and dandy, but I need to think about tomorrow. I need to think about next week and next month. How can I even begin to think about the next 20, 30 years? What do you tell them?
So I work with people a little differently. I try to start with their budget and their debts. And my goal is to get people debt free, because when you're free of that debt, then you free money up to invest. So I actually tell college students to, if they can, to go home and live with your parents, pay off that debt, stay there. If it means 3 or 5 years, use almost all of your salary to pay off the student loan debt. I'd like to see people debt free because practically speaking, and I know this because I work with individuals on a one-on-one basis, and I work with couples with their budget, not investing, but how you pay the bills and get out of debt. And what happens is, if they don't attack that at the front end, when they are starting to make more money and they may have put money into a retirement fund, they start to dip into it and take it out as loans or withdrawals or when they change jobs. So practically speaking, they see that not as necessarily their retirement fund, but as something that they can dip into, which we all know that once you do that and you remove it, you're removing the possibility for returns, and it becomes a habit. And so I say, let's get rid of all that debt and or don't take it on. So I kind of try to go back to the beginning of better financial practices that can put you into a position that once you invest for retirement, you don't have to tap that money, or that there's not so much draw on your salary. So, for example, when I'm talking to people about buying a home, I'm saying, don't go by what the bank says that you can afford. When my husband and I were looking for a house, they said we could afford this much. And I said, you must be crazy. And they said, well, we're looking at your gross income. And I'm thinking, well, I don't live on my gross income, Mr. Banker. And so we bought less than what they said we could afford. We used a benchmark, and we also added back in the care that we give to our family members. I was taking care of my disabled brother. I knew that I sent him money every month. So I added that into my debt figure. I didn't get that tub that had the jets because, you just put your hand in the water and go like this and get jets, So I'm just saying that's that we have to, that's practical stuff that people can identify with. Hey, yeah, if I don't have all this debt, then I'll have more money to invest for retirement. Hey, if I don't have the biggest and best house, then that will free up money in my budget to retire and send my kids to school debt free. It's all about decision making. Investment starts with better decision making. We go right to investments as if people know what that is and how to do it, but we don't teach how to make good financial decisions from the time you have a kid or the time you start your first job. And that's where I think that we have to put more effort in, teach people how to make decisions so that they can be great investors, which is what, my husband and I do. I don't tell anybody something that I wouldn't do myself.
And I think that brings us right back to financial literacy and what you were talking about, Carrie. I mean, shouldn't parents, you would like to think, or guardians have this discussion with young people who may be looking at college, and maybe college isn't for everyone, and higher education in the traditional sense is not for everyone, because for some folks that means debilitating debt at a very young age for a very long time, right, Carrie?
Absolutely. I always tell people, my life has been spent on advocating for financial literacy in this country. In my next life, I'm going to be advocating around college expenses and how do we get colleges to bring down the cost of college. I don't get that at all. But there are studies. Anna Marie Lasardi, who's a friend of mine at GW, studies this, and a lot of young people say that had they had financial literacy, they would have taken out fewer loans than had they known better. We're just launching these young people with no information, as Michelle said. So, is it right for everybody? Not necessarily, although I am a big believer in college. I do feel like it again, another equalizer. And so I will try to find for any young person who wants to go to college. You can go to community college. You can live at home, as Michelle said. There are ways to do it. There's online, get those 2 years up front and then go to Harvard or whatever, because on your resume, that's what's going to show. No one's going to know what you did the first 2 years.
Hey, I want to get you in here and get your thoughts on this. I mean, it's sort of the great debate. I mean, Maggie and Michelle sort of brought us two different views. Maggie saying it's okay if you haven't paid off all that debt and you still want to start to invest or invest in your retirement. Michelle feels real adamant about get rid of that debt, be debt free. Where do you sit with that? I'm sure you talk to clients all the time who are battling with this. Is there a way to find a happy medium?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in getting rid of debt, but there's the good debt and bad debt, and too much debt of any debt is bad. So a way to prioritize your spending, another tool is first, save for your retirement. That should be number one goal. You talked about women being the fifth goal, should be number one. And so if you have a company match, that's number one. Number two is get that cash cushion, emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of cash, just to protect yourself. And then credit card debt is the big one, paying off credit card debt, because that 17% can go into your retirement. Now, student loans, as long as you pay it off and it fits within your, monthly budget, you're okay. You're okay. But credit card debt, we always say, pay off your credit card debt on a monthly basis. And obviously that's not okay for everybody, but get it down. Yeah. And then focus on retirement again. retirement again.
Pretend like it's a bill you have to pay in full, because the interest rates that you carry on those credit cards could very easily wipe you out. But Emily, because you're on the ground sort of investing with women day to day, I want your take on this. And is it okay to start investing and putting money in retirement when you do have some outstanding debt?
So I think it depends. As Carrie said, there's good debt and bad debt. And thinking about this, and how we always think about it is actually you should pay off that debt first. And so look at that first step of starting to pay off your debt. And then it's not actually invest next, it's create that savings fund. So that cash fund is, I know Carrie and Michelle both alluded to earlier, is you need to create what we call emergency fund in case you lose your job, as we've seen many people do have in the past, 6 to 9 months with everything going on. And so focusing on that and finding ways to do it. We actually I work with wealthy women, but we at Valuesbased also created a way for a debit card that actually rounds up your purchases, so that when you buy your $3.50 coffee, you can actually choose round up and save that 50 cents to go into an account in order to keep doing that, to pay off your debt, to start your savings account, to start your investment account. And so just creating those habits is super important in investing money, everything. I know a couple people alluded to this, but like the plan is one of the most important things when we're looking at this, and making sure that we're having those conversations and such. And then I just wanted to say one thing before we got to questions and things, is we've talked a lot about education for financial literacy, but what is also important is how the media talks about money and women. And so when you look at things and you look at, like, read a woman's magazine versus a men's magazine, and you'll see it's always like, what's your money type? Like, oh, you're cute. You do these types of things. And instead of like, here's actual real money advice. And so we need to also change that and have the real advice. It's not just like, oh, you shouldn't. I mean, we did this whole thing about that you shouldn't ridiculing people for telling women they shouldn't buy their latte. Because actually, if you do the math, it actually doesn't work. It's actually this most ridiculous thing that's just shaming women. But making sure that how we're talking about in the media and looking at this is just as important as when we're young. And so making sure that our whole lives that people are talking to us the right way about money.
All excellent points, ladies. And we have got the conversation rolling here, because the questions from viewers are coming in, and I do want to make time for them. So I want to get to a few of them right now. Okay, so this one's coming from Stephanie. It's coming from YouTube. And Maggie, I'm going to throw this one your way. And here's the question. Where can women turn during this pandemic for financial advice, especially those who can't afford to pay a planner or those without assets to invest? Good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who can't afford to hire an expert to help them through this time right now, especially if they're struggling with income or, job loss. So I would say to turn to, honestly, the internet. So there's so many financial folks out there on Instagram and Twitter who are really, really wonderful. A lot of women too. I mean, I'm connected to a lot of women in the personal finance sphere. And obviously there's all of us on this panel as well. So there's a lot of advice, even just generalized advice. So if you couldn't afford to hire someone individually, they probably can't say this is exactly what you should do, because they might not know your personal situation, but more general guidance, more general best practices. There's lots of blogs out there. And like I said, a lot of people kind of using Instagram as a platform, lots of podcasts, and find the ones that actually resonate with you, because there's going to be a lot of people out there who do not align with your values, or they do not understand your circumstances. There are people that kind of have tunnel vision with how you approach personal finance, or they say one size fits all. So being flexible and looking around and seeing kind of what resonates with you and what actually makes sense, and trying not to get scared away if it is a little intimidating at first.
Carrie, I saw you wanted to jump in here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, financial planning does sound, like for the wealthy, and it is absolutely not. It's for everybody. And there's a lot of, like Maggie says, there's things on the internet, free financial planning. I did want to do not a shameless plug, but schwabmoneywise.com is a it's an educational public service website, no pushing products, but tools and calculators, information on all aspects of money, including raising money-wise kids. So I just wanted to put that out as a tool for people.
Carrie, can you just repeat what that is again for folks who didn't catch it the first time?
SchwabMoneyWise.com.
Okay, great. Here's another question, and I'm going to give this one to you, Michelle. This is from Cherry from YouTube. How do you encourage low-income families and mothers who have not had the education or examples of investing in their community? And I think that's such a great question, because so often we learn by example. If the example isn't there, where do you turn?
Well, I think that's where education in the schools can pick up the load. Or in community organizations. I have a financial literacy program at my church. It is a year-long program where we meet for a couple of hours once a month. And when I say a couple hours, like 2 to 3 hours, where people sit and I talk. And you would think, who sits for that long? But at the end of that 3 hours, people are still on, and I'm still answering questions. So look around in your community for trusted places where you can get basic financial information. I like a website, debtadvice.org, which is run by the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. And so you can get budget help free most of the time, or a very low amount of money to sort of get you on the path to have that extra money. Community college classes, there are a lot of free classes. I try to make sure you go to good sources and listen, the Washington Post, for goodness sakes, our business section is one of the best in the country. And we have a personal finance columnist. I don't know who she is, who regularly tries to inform you about these things. And I'm not selling anything other than trying to make sure that you're on the right path. So low income or middle income or even upper income, because let's also let's put a punch a hole in that bubble that somehow people who got money know what they're doing with their money, and that is just not true. I have worked with people who make no money and are really good money managers, and people making 6-figure salaries and sometimes 7 who don't know squat about how to handle their money. So don't think that just because you're low income that somehow you can't handle this money, because I've met doctors and lawyers and accountants. One accountant's wife stopped me in church and said, "Can you talk to my husband?" Because on the job, he's good about handling other people's money, but totally bad handling their finances. So I need to empower you that no matter what your income, don't think rich people know everything. When I say rich, I don't mean people really rich, because a lot of people who look rich are not actually rich. They're broke.
Good distinction.
True.
You've also heard, you hear about people winning the lottery and then going broke shortly thereafter because they didn't know how to manage their money, right? And then people are sort of clawing at them, wanting money. You see athletes come into a lot of money at an early age and blow that as well. So stature doesn't mean that you necessarily know what to do with the money that you're earning. I want to get to another question now. And Emily, this one's for you. This is from Kat from YouTube. How can women catch up, given that we're already so behind in retirement? And it's not a place you want to be in, right? The catch-up game, but so many of us are. So where do you even start?
So, you should definitely start just by taking control of your own money when thinking about this. And so when I look at it, there are accounts called IRAs, which are by definition individual retirement accounts, and then 401ks, which are, a way to do that. And they literally say the word individual in it. So you, yourself, not your spouse, not someone else. They've defined these accounts so that you should go take control of investing in them. And so looking at it, just starting with that investment, doing these types of things, investing in your 401k, investing in your IRA, doing all of that. But also there's just so many ways that you can actually look to find, whether it's financial advisor, whether it's just advice online. I know during the pandemic, we actually took, time we decided to answer every single question someone sent to us, which was kind of a huge undertaking and ended up being kind of crazy actually. But looking at that advice that's just out there for people. It's just an article on our website that people can go read. And so educating yourself on these things, understanding these things, part of we have it on our site, but so many other places do too, of thinking about how, putting in your goals, seeing what you need to do to achieve those. So also just being realistic and thinking about it. And so saying, all right, if I want to retire at 60, and I want to spend X amount of dollars a year, and this is how much I make, and all these types of things. How much do I need to be spending and saving and doing all these things? And then sitting down and actually creating a budget for yourself around this. We always say, you know, we talk about values-based and intentional investing. There's also an intentional spending that I know Maggie alluded to as well. And so making sure that, you know, we do something with clients that, honestly, I have clients, we have people who do it who, you know, are on the low income side. And I have clients who do it who are some of the richest people in the country. And you'd be amazed that I've gone through this exercise with them, that it's literally sitting there and aligning how they spend their money to what their personal values are, like Maggie talked about, and thinking about, okay, how are you actually spending your money? Let's look at all this. And so making sure that you can actually save, invest, because the sooner you invest, the better. So investing tomorrow is too late. You need to start today. A lot of people will just continue to put it off because it's what is another month, what is another year. Today is the right day. And so I encourage everyone just after this, you should just go invest and just start off.
I want to get to this question from Angeli, and Michelle, this might be one you want to weigh in on. She says, my godchild will be starting her first job. How can I introduce the conversation about investing so she knows to save? Her parents don't necessarily discuss investing to their kids. This is a godmother who wants to do the right thing by her godchild.
Yeah. So on the first job, the good thing is they send them home with a stack of paperwork. You know, and oftentimes if they've got a 401k, there's a whole bunch of information. Use that as an opportunity to have that discussion about what to do on your first job. So just say, hey, listen, I know you just started this job. You probably got a bunch of paperwork. Why don't you come over and let's talk about it and how to set things up. And for example, on my very first job out of college at the Baltimore Evening Sun, I called my grandmother. I was reporting on this major fire. And I was like, and the first thing she said was, did you set up your emergency fund at the, you know, in the office? I said, no, I hadn't time. She hung the phone up on me. She clicked me off. And I called her back, Mama, what is that? Did you go upstairs and put money aside from your paycheck? And I said, I didn't have time. She hung up again. And then finally, I went upstairs and set up the account and called her back and told her about the big fire. So, you know, use the opportunity of the things that are happening on their job to sit them down and show them what they need to do to set it up and begin to save for retirement and save for that emergency fund that Carrie talks about. So there are plenty of opportunities, moments that you can spend and use to talk to your godchild, your own children. And if I can just go back to that question about when to start kids on Money Talks, I started when they were in their car seat. The moment they point to something that costs money is the time that you start to talk to them about money.
We are never too young. In the car seat, Michelle says. All right, guys, this question made me a little mad. Kay from YouTube says she's trying to find a financial advisor. She says, every financial advisor I've spoken to has told me I need 200,000 plus saved to even be worth their time. So Maggie, I'm going to start with you on this one. How do you start to find the right financial planner for you if that's the route you want to go? Somebody else had a question similar. Kate said, should I, quote unquote, date some, not literally, but should I date some of these financial planners before choosing one? What are some things to look for?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think that is a big fear that a lot of people have, is that they just don't have enough money and no one will actually work with them. So the first thing I would say is where, you know, Emily is at Valuesbased and they're a robo-advisor. So you can just get started with pretty much anything that you have. I don't even think there's a minimum to invest. Yeah, a penny.
There you go.
Yeah. So if you don't, maybe you're not ready to work with someone on an individual basis. And so starting with a robo advisor where there is no real minimum balance that you have to be putting in there. But also talking to family and friends who are in similar financial circumstances as you, or that maybe you assume they're in similar financial circumstances as you, and asking who they use and how they got started. And that's also related to the dating of financial advisors as well, so that you can find people that you know are at least trustworthy to the people that you are close with or that you care about. And so, that is a personal referral that you're getting so that, you have a little bit of headway there. But also making sure whoever you work with is going to be a fiduciary so that they're legally bound to be acting in your best interest rather than making suggestions or trades based on what their commission is going to be or whatever their income is going to be. So making sure to look for that specifically as well.
Boy, this hour really whizzed by, didn't it? We can just keep going on and on. I have one more question that I want to go around the horn and get everybody's take on if we can. And here it is. Carrie, I'm going to start with you again. What is the number one money move women should be making right now if they haven't already? Number one money move.
Getting a financial plan. It's the roadmap for your financial life. It creates the financial security, the confidence, and you're more likely to achieve your goals. And you do not have to have $200,000 to have one. Any reputable firm, Schwab, Ellevest, Fidelity, all of them will take you no matter how much money you have, and they will care about you and take you along your journey.
Michelle, number one money move for women?
I think the number one move is to start with, what do I want to do with my money? Just get an index card and just decide, what do you want to do? For us, when I first got married, was to send my kids, all three of them, to college debt free. Because without this action plan for your money, then you do sort of flounder. So what do you want? At the end of your life, you want to close your eyes and go, oh my gosh, this is what I did with the money that I made. And when you have that envision, then you can do the things, save and do things like that. But if you don't know for sure, then you're not going to be able to save and have money for investment. I want to retire before I need a walker. And I know as much, I'm a great mom, but my kid, I can't count on my kids taking care of me in my old age. So I want to be sure that I can take care of myself. So that was a major goal. Because you already heard what kind of mother I am. So you can imagine they want to put me in the back room with the TV that don't work. So retiring so that I'm independent is on my index card.
Ruth, Michelle, you're taking Ruth Bader Ginsburg's advice, right? We started this out with her quote, be your own person, be independent. That's exactly what you're trying to do. And by the way, not be a burden to your kids as you get older. Maggie, want to get your take on this. Number one money move women should be making right now if they haven't already.
Yeah, get a full understanding of your financial circumstances. So understanding how much money is coming in, how much needs to be going out, what kind of debt you have, what you did with your past retirement accounts, if you've had them, just getting that full financial landscape so that you actually have a roadmap for going forward, because you don't really know how to get to where you want to be unless you know where you're starting. So that's the first step I'd take.
All right, Emily, I'm going to give you the last word here. Number one money move for women right now.
Yes, I would say also creating a plan. Money is the number one source of stress for women. First thing. So creating that plan and having that confidence is huge. And with that, I'd say once you have that plan, as Maggie talked about earlier, I always stress people, find a financial advisor, whether it's a robo-advisor or a human or whoever it may be, that you can actually speak to and that you actually like. A lot of times people ask me, how do I know if my advisor is the right person? I said, it's always, you're going to have to tell them things that you do not tell your family and your best friends and such. And so make sure that you feel comfortable to call them and tell them anything that comes to your mind so that you can actually be successful on that plan that you created.
I'm going to send you all a big virtual hug here during this pandemic because we brought some great things to light during this conversation and hopefully gave people some real actionable things they can do to impact their finances right now. I want to thank our panel of experts, Carrie Schwab Pomerantz, Michelle Singletary, Emily Green, and Maggie Germano for being with us. Thank you all so much. And if you missed any of the webinar, you want to rewatch parts of it, put it on a loop and, play it as you go to bed at night, you can do it. It's available on yahoofinance.com as well as on the bipartisanpolicy.org website. So again, yahoofinance.com, bipartisanpolicy.org. Thank you all for joining us. Wishing you all good money and good sense.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.